Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last part of today's Kentico Experience Connection 2022 first day live stream session. This session is the panel discussion with our wonderful guests. The topic of today's discussion is digital experience maturity, how to assess it, how to grow it, why it's important, and actually what our wonderful guests actually think about digital experience maturity, what are their experience. Let me introduce my today's guests. First, Dave Conder, Chief Technology Officer at Blue Modus. Welcome, Dave. Eugene Pedden, Chief Technology Officer at Ray Business Technologies. Welcome, Eugene. Wes McChristian, Global Kentico Experience Practice Director at AmericanEagle.com. Welcome, Wes. Arlene Goldberg, Director of E-Commerce at SHI. Welcome, Arlene. And last but not least, Dominic Pinter, Managing Director at Kentico Experience. Hello, Dominic. Let me also thank AmericanEagle.com, who is the gold sponsor of this panel discussion during Kentico Experience Connection 2022 for North America. And without more words, let me jump into the first question because we have a lot to cover. So, my dear guests, digital experience maturity refers to a level of sophistication in measuring and delivering digital customer experiences across different touchpoints. We can also call it, let's say, digital sophistication. We already used that term during today, if you want. It tells you how successful you are in adoption of different digital marketing, digital commerce, and digital customer experience tools. It can be measured on the company level, department level, or even on the personal level. So what's your personal digital experience maturity? What's your company digital experience maturity? It's all interconnected. In today's world of rapid digital transformation, growing digital experience maturity is said to be crucial for your survival. It's a key element of business change, of business success. What is your personal experience with this concept, and how important is it for you, your companies, and your businesses nowadays? So this is the first question. And let me start with Wes McChristian from AmericanEagle.com with the first answer. Wes, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jan. So it's a good question because I think it helps set a baseline for the discussion, right? And the short answer is it's very important. And for us as a full service digital agency, what we recognize as maturity, it doesn't just happen. And so what we feel is extremely important in the context of experience and maturity is a discussion around planning and goal setting. And right, to be clear, this isn't a conversation about technology. It's a conversation about growth and how do we move the needle in the context of the business or the enterprise. And sometimes that means sort of stopping and celebrating where you are, but also forecasting a trajectory and looking forward to all of the tactics and discussions and enablement and empowerment that comes with the conversation around growth.
Thank you, Wes. And Arlene, you represent here the client side. So let me continue with you. And what's your experience here?
Well, personally, I've been doing some content management or electronic publishing for a very long time, and in the website space for about 15 plus years. Things that I've seen that I think, like in my organization currently, the challenge is people want to run before they walk or even crawl. And so it's kind of keeping that under control and how do we get there in a methodical way. In our case, we got to even doing this because I've been at my company now for 5 years. We couldn't prioritize the development needs for these kind of activities, for the homegrown system that we had. And everything that our marketing team wanted were certainly reasonable, but we had so many other development needs to tackle that I finally started pushing that we need an off-the-shelf environment. You know, as I looked at the maturity model, I had different parts of the city, mega city, hamlet, depending on the different line items. And I would think that a lot of other customers are in a similar position.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about the assessment definitely during the discussion. Thank you very much, Arlene. Eugene, what's your experience nowadays with digital experience maturity?
I would start with, as a customer, I actually experience products more first on the digital space rather than in the physical space. So most of the time, as customers, that's the first touch point that we get. It's not, going to a store and holding the product. It's not. You experience it. Maybe you see an ad, or you see a reference, or you see an article, you read it, and then eventually maybe you want to interact with the product, or you buy the product. So from my personal experience, I actually buy more online than maybe on the physical side. Even when you're looking for a house, and it's big now, like how house prices have gone up here in the US, you do first online. That's your first experience before you go and visit the house. That's what you get. Now, how does it get there? You have to look at it. If you were the ones offering those services, how do you do that? How do you make that happen? It doesn't happen overnight. It takes, it takes a team, it takes a vision to say, this is the experience that we're trying to make. And since we're creating, it's part of digital transformation, evolving or jumpstarting the experience of customers on many levels and different touch points. And that's what sometimes we miss. We just think of ourselves, but we don't really think of what is the customer looking for. And that's why you have disruptive technologies that come in. And most of the disruption that happens, it's all in the digital space, because that's how fast you can work, you can move. You have companies that are 6 months, 3 months old, and they can disrupt just 100-year-old companies. You've seen that so many times. And it's just basically starts with a vision. What would you like? Because most of the time now, it will be on the digital space that people will experience your product or service.
Thanks a lot, Eugene. And we will definitely touch the, let's say, multi-experience or omnichannel and connecting physical and online definitely during the discussion. Dave, let me now ask you about the current experience with digital experience and the maturity and transformation.
Yeah, I think everyone has mentioned some great things. In the last 2 years, especially, we've seen such crazy change. And I mean, look at the world events today, right? It's still uncertain. There's going to be continued change. And I think part of the maturity model is not just building, the mega city and the metropolis, but it's also preparing for that change and making sure that your systems, your people, really everything related to it, your audience, like your tools, they can change and they can adapt quickly. Because we saw a lot of companies really struggle back in March and, the first sort of, say, 6 months of the COVID pandemic, and how poorly prepared so many companies were to pivot to a much more digital focused environment. I mean, no one had seen that before. So, and again, I think other world events are showing us that we need to prepare that even more so. So I'd say it's more important now than ever, because in the past, even 5 years ago, the competition wasn't necessarily as aggressive and the world events weren't changing as much. But now, like Eugene said, a startup can destroy a 100-year company very quickly if they get their digital marketing strategy correct. So I do think it's more critical than ever, and it's going to continue to be more and more. This is the future, and this is what we need to focus on.
Thanks, Dave. And let's actually finish the first round to set up actually the floor from the discussion with Dominic. And I already have some notes for follow-up questions, but Dominic, now let's give word to you.
Yeah, I wanted to add actually a couple points on top of what both Eugene and Dave said. So, like Eugene talked about this physical and online world, and to me this resonated very much, because what we see actually a lot when we're talking to the clients is that they are actually struggling with understanding, how they should move forward. And so the way how I'm looking at this digital experience maturity model is that it's essentially the journey, and that journey, it's a journey for you, and that model should really help you to tell you really like how to move forward, you know, how to make the next step, how to make the next incremental innovation. And then following up on what Dave said about the preparation, this is also something what I feel is very, very important, and how we actually think about our own product and about our positioning with that unified EXP, that we want to deliver to our customers a platform which has powerful enough tool set which you can leverage and which you can, you know, use if you need to, or when you need to move forward, right? Like, so combining these two things, I think that for me, that digital maturity, you know, it doesn't matter where you are right now, as long as you are able to understand, okay, you are here, this is the way how you can move forward, and this is where this digital experience model can help you to really tell you, okay, these are your next steps, or, you know, these are the other areas where you can move forward, you know, how can you really like be more smart, more innovative, and then, you know, having a powerful platform such as Unified DXP, for example, Kentico Experience, which helps you really to do that next steps, right? Because also in today's world, especially, you need to really move forward very quickly, right? And so you need to have the technology which enables you to do that. So if there is a startup which, you know, is trying to disrupt you, then actually you can fight back, right? And you can somehow beat them, right?
Let me connect a few dots here and ask a follow-up question, because I'm really glad that already the word journey was mentioned, yeah, and that was actually something what we discussed with Wes already about this topic in a podcast, but that's a journey, yeah. Then vision was mentioned, that you really need a vision. And no matter if you are a startup to disrupt some industry, or if you are a really old company who wants to transform the business, you need that vision. And for that, when you have the vision, you need to have some forecasting. You need to have goal settings, and then with goal settings, you have the strategies and tactics, yeah. And this is actually how you should, let's say, build that, and how then you can continue growing the digital maturity. But for the vision, yeah, for setting the vision, you need people who set up this vision, who actually like pronounce that vision. So what are your experiences right now, like especially in this past 2 years, COVID era, who are the people in the companies who really set up the visions, who push the company forward in this? It really doesn't have to be always the top level, yeah. And let me ask first this question, Arlene, yeah. How was that in your company in past 2 years? Who set the vision?
Wow, that's a really great question. And I've had someone that I work with say that you were brought in, Arlene, to be a disruptor and to make change. So we've been doing things on many different levels the same. And we fall back, as people do, fall back on habits that they're used to. And so to come in and look at it differently and find a successful path to say, here's what we need to do so that we can be more successful. We have an interesting setup that I kind of own the overall e-commerce side of our website. And that vision, I'm the product owner for the different features and functionality, growing the revenue, gross margin, et cetera. And our marketing organization handles the content side, which I've seen at other companies as well. And the technical side, which is where I kind of lean, is our goal is to give them the pillars, the places on the site for them to enable their content and to do it without a lot of friction from development. As I said earlier, we needed to give them space to do some of the things they need to do without it getting prioritized in the same bucket as features and functionality on the website for our customers. But there are challenges in that, and those are the barriers that I'm trying to break down, that are there to try and start to say, hey, have you thought about using the Kentico for this? Or what other feeds do we need to bring in that we can leverage to start understanding the customer's journey and the customer path? What data do we need? Whether it's how our customers behaving on the site. We have pretty sophisticated Google Analytics set up so that we have a lot of data about our customers and their behaviors on the website. What more can we bring in? How do we tie in CRM data? How do we tie in others? How do we ultimately get to that personalization? But I'd say that there's a lot of journey there as well too.
Okay, thanks, Arlene. Dave, let me ask you on the partner side, like what do you see, especially in past 2 years, who set the vision for the digital transformation, for the growing digital sophistication?
Yeah, I think it's a multi-partner process. So typically the executive layers are going to be setting the direction and the goals, but they often don't really set the vision, especially when it comes to really what the digital sort of strategy is going to look like. So typically you'll have direction coming from the executive levels, and then you'll have the marketing team or it depends on the company, but the way they're set up, typically someone focused on marketing, kind of like Arlene is, and the actual execution of the tools and getting to the customers. But then I think an area where partners like Blue Modus and many other companies involved here, we add another flavor, because being an agency, being an external consultant, we have a lot of experience across different stratas of companies, different situations. We have people who have been doing this for years, in many challenging situations. And so you have the direction, you have the owner, the hero on the client side and the marketing side, and then you have someone who can help. And it's not always an agency partner, but oftentimes it's a collaboration between IT and the marketing, whatever it may be, but you really need that collaboration for it to work well. Once that vision is established, really all you're doing is you're laying the foundation. And when you look at the sort of the concept of this digital maturity model, it's really about building the house. And I like what it says in some of the literature. It's an adventure, and it's a never-ending adventure. We have clients we've been working with for well over a decade, and all we've been doing with them is taking one step every day forward. There's no destination, because the world's going to change, technology is going to change. So it's really important that you set that foundation. Key things, like Arlene mentioned, good analytics, a good model of how the relationship between your digital marketing activities relate to revenue or other KPIs that you care about. You have to have those basics in place. And like I said, it takes a team to do that. You can't just have one marketing. Now there's the occasional superhero, and those are great. But the problem with the superheroes is they get burned out and they eventually leave. And so if a company's model is based on just this amazing person or small team, that's dangerous, because no matter what, there's always going to be turnover, and burnout's real too. I've seen it, especially in the last 2 years. We've seen some clients really struggle. And so I think it's important that you build this true foundation so that you can become that metropolis, the mega city, but it is baby steps.
Thanks a lot, Dave. And you made really several great points, and I especially love the one about the collaboration, because for us in Kentico Experience is also a lot about the collaboration between different departments to build our own digital experience maturity. But I see a gentleman want to react. So first, Eugene, let's continue.
So let me go back, and I can feel for Arlene, because the vision is very important. Everything starts with a vision. And normally, the vision comes from top management because they want to drive business value out of the vision. There's two things I've seen when the visions are created. One, it's that there's a real need for them to serve from the founders or the management team to say, I want to serve my customers with a new product or experience or service, and this is my vision. And then there's another way that the vision is created by fear of missing out. My competitor is doing this. I have to do this myself. That's the scariest one because you don't know where it's coming from. It's not driven by a real need for you to serve your customers. Now, once and David's right, it starts with one person, but it's really hazy. Most of the time when customers come to us, I want this done, and it's like, what does it mean? They can really explain it. And that starts same thing also with the vision. It's hazy at first. So normally, and I've gone through this one, I've created a product out of a vision of our CEO and basically took it from there. And you have an innovation team. You thresh out the details of vision. Is it really what you want? Because then you're asking for investments. You're not going to get your investments. You're not going to get your money unless you clarify that vision and what is going to be the return. And those are very important things that you have to go through. Once you have clarified that, you will have your sponsorship. Then you will say, because you have to work, as Arlene was saying, is it going to be an IT team that's going to support me? Is it going to be a marketing team that's going to support in executing that vision? Basically, it's not going to be support. You are all together. You are part of that team. It's not going to be there's an IT team, there's a marketing team, there's a customer service team. They might be the silos, but those silos, especially for larger organizations, those are so hard to break. So sometimes it's easier to just create a new, an innovation team within that are composed of teams that are with different disciplines. You have technology, you have teams that are experts in the technology side, on the marketing side, on the sales side, distribution side, anything that is needed to make that vision happen. Once you have that, you can all do it as yourself. As Dave was saying, there are people who have done bits and pieces of that. You cannot build it yourself. You can learn from them. You have to reach out to partners. You have to reach out best of breed across all the different things that you needed to do. They might be on the technology side, they might be on the execution side, but those are things that you have to reach out so that by the time that you do it, you don't have to take so much time. You have just look at the best examples of how things were done. And then the culture has to be there within the team, because if the team doesn't have the right culture to be able to do that, we're here, we have the sponsorship, we're given the green light. How do we make this happen? Sometimes we lose out on, we're scared to do things. We're scared to make mistakes because the spotlight is on us. But again, sometimes the spotlight is on you and you're the ones who are going to make it happen. And just have to believe in yourself that I'm not doing it alone. I work with partners. There's so many partners that you can work with. You can work with mentors. That's the beauty of it now. It's all accessible. You just have to reach out, right? And with that, you'll be able to fulfill and make your vision happen.
Thanks a lot, Eugene. And I would like to really point to one part of what you said, and this is the fear of missing out. If you would walk out from the panel discussion with one takeaway, this is probably one of the most important one, that fear of missing one, because if you're competitors, that's not the right vision. That's not the right thing, how to decide about where you go. It should be data, it should be understanding your customers. So I really love that. And I see Wes wants to react. So Wes, let's continue the discussion.
Yeah, and you're right, Jan, because I think there are some false positives in that journey, right? When you're using competitors to potentially define the direction that we're headed, and maybe to tie that to some of the word that Arlene used was disruptor. And I think a healthy vision comes with challenge. And I'm reminded of a very charismatic marketing leader that I worked with, who's a good friend of mine, but he was all vision and no execution. And he just needed somebody to ask him why. Why are we doing this? What are the goals? And so there's this immense strength that comes with tying the vision to the goal. And listen, sometimes there may be no team, and that's okay. But understanding how we get from point A to point B and a discussion around it, is often, I think, really what helps bring healthy growth to the context of maturity.
Thanks a lot, Wes, for this comment. And I see Dominic wants to add to this. Yeah, I see the smile. I know this smile.
Yeah, because this actually what you just said, Wes, is a perfect kind of like intro to what I wanted to say as a kind of like a challenge, or it's more a question too, because the people who are listening to us or who are watching this today, I believe many of them might be struggling with one thing, and that's that energy. You can say it's, you know, it's time, it's budget, it's you know, the complexity. You know, it could be caused also by the burnout, because typically what we see and in you know, our world, like there is always this grand vision, right, for the customer. Like, okay, so I'll start with the content implementation, and then I'll start with the personalization. I'll do email marketing, I'll do social media marketing, I'll do marketing automation, right? Like I'll do all the different tracking, so I can do, you know, proper analytics and everything. And then sometimes they simply stop at that first level, right? They just and now, like, don't get me wrong, but they, in quotes, just implement the website and that's it, right? Because they run out of, you know, that energy, or out of money, or out of simply like there is another priority, you know, coming their way. So what I'm wondering about is what you would recommend back to these people, you know, like how to actually overcome that, right? Because as you said, like that sometimes, you know, like you have the vision, but there is like no team, right? But then, and also like Eugene talked a lot about the execution, right? And how many people you need to connect together in order to execute on that vision. So it's pretty complex challenge. So how would you overcome this challenge, or how do you overcome this challenge, or what do you recommend to your clients, or even Arlene, like how do you actually, you know, push everybody in your organization to make that happen?
A great question, Dominic. So, and I see actually our guests want to react. So, Dave, let's start with you.
Sure, thanks. I think it's really important, first of all, to have alignment on what matters. You know, you got to prioritize correctly, and that prioritization has to be based on what actually matters to the business. At the end of the day, if you can't correlate somehow performance of the business, so revenue, whatever it is, to those things you're doing, you're probably focusing on the wrong things. So first off, simplify, focus on a smaller number of things. And I think number two is take off small bites and get wins. You know, getting momentum is critical. I mean, many times it is a question of investment, right? If the management doesn't see the rate of return that they expect, why would they continue to do that, right? So you have to give them confidence that you can actually get this wheel turning. It's like a big, heavy wheel, and you have to start spinning it. And that momentum is what's going to be really powerful once you get it going. But you can't just try to crank it immediately. You got to do small things. So whatever that is, maybe having a really good set of analytics structures and reports that give you a very clear vision of what your customers are doing, as an example. That's not super sophisticated. It's kind of a baseline thing, but even getting that dashboard up to management and helping them understand correlations to events, to product releases, to whatever it is, that's a huge win. And that gives them confidence that if they continue investing, and that's money, time, energy, people, tools, whatever, that you'll actually have more success in the future. And then I think just iterating kind of an agile process is really important, especially early on. Later on, once you have momentum, once you have proven, you have the team, you have whatever the resources you need, in many cases, that's the time to start doing the more aggressive things, or things that are kind of shooting for the moon to try to make a game changer. Don't try to change the game on day one. That's going to be a mistake that is going to come back and haunt you, because it's very, very difficult to get that momentum started.
Thank you, Dave. And let's continue the momentum of the discussion with Eugene.
So you have to have a compelling vision first, because you have to sell that vision to the people that are going to work on it. Because if you don't have a vision that people would buy into, it's just work, right? And if you have a really clear vision of how you're serving your customers, how you're making people want to work on your project or want to work on that, you know, on that enterprise that you would like to do, that already starts it. You know, everyone wants to start to be part of the team to make a difference. And once, and taking off from what Dave was saying, is that you have to have successes in between, because it cannot be like a 2-year project and then see the result after 2 years come back. That's why we have the agile methodology now, where in every step of the way you have measures and you can see results sooner, and you'll get support. Imagine your CEO or your top management is giving support for you from the financial side and even moral side, and even having other team members in other, you know, areas in your organization that say, hey, help these guys. If they're not seeing results, the other teams will just say, hey, I've been helping them, I don't see anything, I don't see any progress. And that gets the team down. If somebody is just saying, you know, I don't want to help them, it's like, nothing, I'm not seeing anything. That's why you have to have very clear things. And this maturity model helps a lot, because then these are not all in that you have to buy into and say, hey, I want to see everything, right? You can do it piecemeal, get your feet wet, especially if you don't have the expertise, for if you, the resources that you have doesn't have the expertise yet. You have to build the experience to be able to do that, gain your confidence, baby steps, right? When we see babies having first steps, we're so proud of them. You want to see that. And then the more we ask them to run, but you cannot run unless you take your first steps first and make that happen.
Thanks, Eugene. Wes, let's continue with you.
Oh man, I'm gonna just repeat everything that Eugene and Dave just said, I think, because I think there's a couple of key points, and both Eugene and Dave use the word agile, and we subscribe to the same philosophy, and we recommend the same philosophy from a very pure standpoint, right? So we're not talking about methodology, right? We're talking about, when faced with one or more decisions, take a step forward to get you closer to your goal, with the intent behind that decision to put yourself in the position of the greatest flexibility, right? Because when we make those decisions, that helps empower the next step and the next step and the next step, right? All the way along every single iteration of our plan. And what we use to inform each of those steps is the measurement of our success. If we're thinking tactically for a second, talking about things like PPC, right, which require an investment in order to garner a return, right? I said earlier, why are we making this investment? Are we getting that return? We have to ask these questions of ourselves in order to measure these steps that we're taking, regardless of whether it's Google Analytics or you know, any other system that's providing us data. But all told, right, we have to build up this momentum in order to start moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Wes. And Arlene, what's actually how we are coping with that on client side?
You know, I have to agree a lot with what Dave said about those, and Eugene as well, kind of getting those steps, getting that momentum. As I talked with someone about coming on this panel that makes my company unique, we have grown totally organically. And in that, we hadn't been getting introduced to a lot of possible new technologies or other systems by bringing on board, you know, buying other companies or this and that. And we also grew organically internally. So it was people that grew up in the ranks of the company that took on more positions, but maybe didn't know e-commerce or social media or whatever. And so we grow inside ourselves. That was actually part of how I came to be here. Was our CEO was looking to bring in experience on e-commerce to have that basis. I think we do generate excitement when we have wins, and that it all gets measured by whatever analytics, whether it's Google and page views and revenue or gross margin or however you're impacting that. But we have to have those wins. Our system just launched the end of February. I'm looking forward to those wins for our marketing team now so that we can generate that excitement in that pillar of our organization. I think there's a lot of great vision in that channel. It's also making sure we break it up in the right spots to not take on so much that we're almost drowning in it, but that we're getting those wins and being the building blocks to get on it. And I think that's where that maturity model too, I thought about the different pillars. It's the building blocks to get to that level of maturity, and what do you want to use to get there?
Thank you, Arlene. And like you've talked a lot about small steps and getting the momentum slowly, yeah, building that. But Arlene mentioned actually like people being drowned, yeah. Now imagine, not imagine, yeah. Remember the situation 2 years ago when, yeah, you were trying to build like slowly, small steps, yeah, having the data, building the momentum, and then you have the black swan, the external disruptor, yeah, like COVID was, yeah. And how you actually make sure you are not drowned then, yeah, in that situation, yeah, how to actually compete with that situation. So Wes, like what you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly tragic disruptor, I think. And you know, as we look in the rear view of the past 2 years, you know, what we really saw was COVID or the pandemic, like it pulled the curtain back on anybody that wasn't strong in digital. And you know, what that led to was, maybe in a word, innovation, right? Because these brands were looking for ways to work more efficiently in the face of unknown, like not knowing what's going to happen next, what tomorrow is going to bring, and or how the situation is going to evolve. So we saw, you know, a lot of steps taken to do consolidation, brand consolidation, system consolidation, operational consolidation, right? All in the effort to be more efficient in the way that that work was being done.
Thank you very much, Wes. And Dave, how you actually tackle that?
Well, I think if you rewind to January of 2020, it would be probably not a great idea to anticipate COVID-19 and the resulting effect, because it's never happened before. So it truly is a black swan kind of event. So you got to be careful to find the balance. Typically, the virtue lies in the mean, right? So if you're going to have a flexibility, Wes mentioned earlier, you know, you want to be able to always make decisions with flexibility in mind. That's really important. If you're so focused on flexibility that you can't actually get anything done, then that's counterproductive. And if you're so rigid and inflexible, that's also damaging. So you have to have an open mind. So we had a black swan event. That's a great example of, like Wes said, a tragic thing that impacted everyone way faster than we could ever possibly imagine could have happened. And you see all those consolidations. So now I think, again, with the uncertainty in the future, I think it's a lot more prudent right now to anticipate more black swans, or more, maybe they're not quite as crazy anymore, these global events. At the same time, you got to be really careful not to get analysis paralysis, you know, where you're just like, what do we prepare for? We have to prepare for this, that, you know, and all of a sudden you're now building, you know, this giant wall in front of you that's holding you back. So you have to be really careful about that too. I think movement is important. You don't want to ever stop. You want to always be moving forward, always improving. And yeah, you can have the big ones too, but usually little steps are the best way to do that. So I would just say that the most important thing to focus on is keep your eye on the ball, so you know what that vision is, and we're planning on getting to that destination or the next step, whatever that is, when the marathon, because it is a marathon, is done. But at the same time, watch out and try to anticipate those disruptors that can be catastrophic. Many companies are out of business right now that were in business 2 years ago because, like Wes said, they were exposed, that they had not kept their eye on the ball. They had maybe gotten a little too complacent, honestly, with what they have. Oh, this works. Meanwhile, remember, the competition's always burning the midnight oil. So you always have to have progress and always be pushing, at least in a good direction. It doesn't have to be massive progress, but you have to have momentum at all cases.
Thank you very much, Dave. And let's continue with you, Eugene. Sorry, Eugene, you are muted. Yeah, nice. Online discussion. I was able to say this. Yeah, that was nice connected with the COVID question. Yeah, the most famous question of the COVID situation. Eugene, let's continue.
Yeah, I guess the first reaction is that don't panic, because most of the time that's you know, it's something new. It's totally, as you guys are saying, it's a black swan event. It hasn't happened before, that when we're still alive, when we were here, so we don't know. And if you panic, that's when you make really bad decisions. And that's where we have to say, once you take stock, look around, look at the environment, and then take care of the most important people first. You know, look at your baby steps. We're saying, right? Baby steps. How are your clients? How are they? Are they okay? Can you interact with them? Do they need help? Any support that you can give? After that one, at the same level, look at your employees, because then they will be the ones who are going to be affected most also. More than, you know, on top of your customers, you have to take care of your employees. How will they be able to work? Once they get affected physically, and their families also, it extends to their families. How is your organization going to react to the effects of COVID-19 when it hits your team members? And those are things that are really unknown. We don't know. And those are the things that we have to take baby steps. Just be there for them. Be sure that it's part of the whole experience. Working, you know, your clients, your employees, those are your internal customers. So those are the ones who have to work with and say, hey, we are here. We're still here. You know, it's a disruption that we haven't anticipated. And for some, it was tougher to work, especially for a team that is remote. They don't know how to start doing it. And people are still trying to figure out how we move forward. The good thing that we have seen is that decisions, especially major decisions that they wouldn't have done before, people are making those decisions faster now. They were saying, you know, we cannot wait for this to happen. We have to be more agile. We are looking at tools to be able to say, that's why Zoom must become, the value of Zoom, I don't know how much value has it grown, and they've been struggling for a long time, right? They just made so much, and that's true for all the others that made remote work a reality. And now we've seen that it's, you know, remote work is something that is taken as normal for some. We still want to be in the office for some, but, you know, it just changes a lot.
Thanks, Eugene. Dominic, how we saw it in Kentico experience.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say more that you also need to have the right tool set and the guidance, you know, really like some mentor in ideal situation who can guide you through that, right? So in the particular case of COVID-19, I think that actually digital experience maturity model could be that right tool and the right mentor for you to help you understand, okay, so if I need to change, you know, from, I would say, physical organization into native digital organization, how do I do that, right? And then, you know, guidance which tells you, okay, so let's assess where you are now first, and then, you know, we can tell you like, okay, this is what is your next step. This is how you can move forward, right? Because you will be under the pressure from the time perspective, or everybody was, right? Like that's why, and unfortunately, some companies didn't make it because simply they couldn't stand that pressure, right? But there is a time pressure, there's a money pressure, right? And everything. So you need to, like, I really like what Eugene said, like, don't panic, right? Like, understand where you are, what's your starting point, and how you can move from there, and do those, you know, little incremental steps, but use the guidance, you know, learn from others, especially from others' mistakes, right? And how to not make them yourself. So this is what I wanted to add. And like, just to also answer a bit of your question in that, how we did cope with that, honestly speaking, and I don't want to sound too arrogant, but I was amazed how well we have done that. That like actually from one week to another, we completely switched from fully, you know, in the office to fully remote company. And yes, I mean, it comes with some challenges, right? Like people feel more lonely and they are more disconnected and stuff like that. So not everything was perfect and not everything still is perfect, but still, you know, like as I said, I was really amazed how quickly we have been able to do that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Dominic. And Arlie, let's continue on how was your reaction in SHI?
You know, what's interesting is that I've been a remote employee since I've been at SHI. Our company headquarters are in New Jersey and Austin, and I sit in the suburbs of Chicago. I am closer to Wes than any of my coworkers. And so like I felt like, well, my life didn't really change. I'm still looking at the same tree outside my window that I've been looking at for the 5 years that I've been doing this, maybe a little different because I switched the office around. And I don't mean to make that frivolous. We were, and I don't mean this in a wrong way too. We were a very in-office focused company. And there were not as many remote employees like myself. I personally felt like I could help others with what this is and have some empathy for them now being home and how does that work? And do you have the setup and do you have the equipment and whatever? But we literally built a brand new headquarters in Austin that was going to open up on the 15th of March. And people packed up on the 13th and went home and never went back. And if you look at that, it's amazing what can be done when it has to be done. I think we tried really hard to continue to help our customers because we have to help find products. We're a technology company. That all became hard, but we had to help our employees cope. And I look back and think back on all of this and go, I think we did as good as anybody else. Maybe better than some. We're still in business. I look back on my numbers and our website revenue grew, it at least grew 4%, but it grew. And that's a testament, I think, to the people. I don't look at that question just around this for me, because for me, it's so much bigger than that. So that's what I have to share for that one.
Thank you, Arlene. And Dave, I saw that you want to make a quick comment, so let's continue.
Yeah, I want to just point out one thing, and you know, we were lucky because we were 60% remote before, and now we just are 100% remote. So worked great for us. And like Arlene said, like nothing really changed for most of Blue Modus. But I want to kind of point out some counterexamples that we saw, and maybe some things to think about. You know, necessity is the mother of all invention, but it doesn't guarantee that you're inventing the right thing. We had a lot of clients that were paralyzed because their bureaucracy and their governance rules and the things, you know, the way they operate. We had one client who literally they could not access their email for 3 months because they didn't have a good virtual environment set up and they didn't have a way to do that. So you can imagine that paralysis, that complete grinding to a halt that happens. And universally, those clients or those people companies we work with, the ones that are bureaucratic, the ones that are very corporate, the ones that are very buttoned up, you know, in the traditional sense, every one of those struggled immensely. The ones that were much more loose, more agile, more willing to try new things quickly and not get hung up on the just the bureaucracy of the whole thing, they did fine for the most part. And I think there's a human at cost too. I mean, not just the terrible, you know, deaths and injuries and things, but you know, there's a mental health issues that people have gone through, and there's a lot more there But we've seen the companies that embrace an agile and dynamic and good corporate culture that's really focused on success and supporting each other, they did really well overall. And the ones that are not like that, they're much more corporate, they struggled mightily, pretty badly. And it was really, really tough to watch. We did everything we could to help some of them. Most of them bounced back. A couple didn't really that well, but either way, I think it's a really good lesson to think about is as a company, and this goes beyond digital marketing, but as a company, your number one constituent is your employees, is your colleagues. You have to take care of them, especially in everything digital, where we don't make widgets in a factory. We don't have robots doing that. We have humans that are tasked with challenging, creative problems, and you have to, provide for them, give them a good culture, give them the support they need, and they can weather storms like this. It's really the people that weather the storms, not the companies themselves.
Thank you very much for that comment, Dave. And maybe that actually brings me to maybe the last question, because we have like 7 minutes left. Because and already it was mentioned in the discussion, it's also about a company culture, and you've touched that too. So it's not just about digital experience maturity or digital maturity, it's about a company maturity as such. It's interconnected. And company maturity is also about the company culture, yeah, not just business, also the culture. And you mentioned actually not the examples of actually how companies made it, but also how some companies actually didn't make it. So what are actually the things, yeah, that actually prevent companies, yeah, or that actually are red flags, yeah, within the companies for you, that they are not mature enough as companies to really grow, to really keep an eye on that ball, yeah, to become agile, or that they are not mature enough right now, or they actually can't grow the maturity as a company. Yeah, let me start first with Dave, because he brought that question to me. Yeah, so is there anything else you would add to what you just said, right?
I think there's competing things that exist, and it's always part of the dynamic, the dichotomy here. Companies exist to make money. If they don't make money, unless they're nonprofits, they don't really stay in business. So they do have to make money. But at the same time, like I said, people are the most important asset that you have. Your colleagues are who you are. And for most digital, online companies. So you're always balancing that out. I think one thing to watch out for is if you cannot trace the things that you do, your team does, your division does, directly to the bottom line of your business, that's a red flag. Because, when I talk about bureaucracy and corporate culture, you oftentimes have this abstraction between this team doing all these things, and they can't even recognize how that impacts the company at the end of the day, like positively or negatively. If you can't find that correlation, it's not really obvious to everyone on the team. Like Arlene mentioned before, like having the vision and having the people behind what you're doing. Yeah, that's a huge red flag, because then you're basically, and I keep saying that word, bureaucracy, basically it's just people doing work, but they're not going anywhere. They can't connect they don't have the passion to actually see what they're doing and having purpose. I think that's really, really important to have that. So when we see companies that we work with that have really sort of broken corporate cultures, where there's no connection between what they do and what the company does, where there's no passion at all, where everyone's just kind of doing their job and they don't really care about the impact. And that's a generality. Obviously, there's always going to be people who are totally involved. But when we see that, that's a huge red flag for us. So a lot of times we'll kind of coach. We've become consultants in that way for a lot of our clients, to coach them on how to reinvigorate the energy level and passion and positive energy in the culture. That's going to drive a lot more success than the most amazing DXP platform at the end of the day. I mean, it really is, because you got to have the energy and the fire in your heart to make that happen. Because it is tough. It's a marathon. You can't run a marathon if you don't want to do it. It's not possible. So that's what I'd say.
Thank you very much, Dave. And like Wes, let's continue with you.
Yeah, and DXP is sort of inherently aspirational, right? And so I think that maybe to build on what Dave just mentioned, I think one of the things that we always look out for is how you're going to handle change management. And change management in terms of process, and change management in terms of people. And when we invest in technology, we very often sort of assume some of these things are going to run themselves, right? They're going to make our lives easier. That's why we're making these investments. But it requires the passion, the competency and the capability in order to apply those things to the business and move the needle for the enterprise. And so we'll very often, I think consulting is a perfect word, consult with our clients on how are you going to apply these things once they are in place. Independent of the crawl, walk, or run sort of strategy, how are you going to adopt these and what are you going to be using them for? Those are things, those are conversations, very fruitful conversations to ensure that the enterprise has champions to be able to continue to support technology, investments, and overall maturity.
Thanks a lot, Wes. Thanks a lot, Wes. Eugene, let's continue with you. And Eugene, Arlene, don't worry if we run overtime a little bit. That's completely okay.
I actually have a cheat sheet here. It starts with leadership. So there's several components of the leadership that has to be there. One is the vision, the strategy to make it happen, and then the urgency. If you don't have urgency, you just have a vision. It's like, no, if you don't have the urgency, it's not gonna happen. We've seen also we're in different areas of management, especially the ones under the CEO, they are not aligned. So it becomes like fiefdoms. We're in, you know, this is marketing, this is IT. Hey, you guys have to work together. It's like, oh, it's not my KPI. They don't know. There are also no clear KPIs. So as Dave was saying, what's the business value? What are we measuring here? How do we measure our ROI? If they are not very clear at the start, then you're not going anywhere. And then, as Wes was saying, how do you do the change management? What's the incentive for the people to make this happen? You know, there's a lack of incentive for the teams to do and make these changes. Hey, you're asking us to adopt all of these tools, which we don't know how to do, and these are all new, and I don't know how I'm going to do. I just stay and do the same things again and again. But then management also just expects employees to adapt. This is part of what Wes was saying. Hey, I told you to do this, just do it. Yeah, that's where the vision is really missing there, and the clarity of how it should be done. And that's where the engagement of employees is very, very minimal. And then people will be averse to risks. They don't want to take the risks. It jeopardizes my career, or that's not really my job. I don't want to do it. There's a resistance to change. And then especially when we introduce all of these tools, the alignment of the technology and the talent that we have. So this is the challenge always, do we have the talent to be able to adopt all of these new technologies, or do we bring in somebody from the outside? And you bring in somebody from the outside, it also creates friction in one way in how you bring that in. So it becomes a balancing act. How do you make it work together? And that's why, again, the leadership and the vision and the clarity of that, wherein people buy into what you're trying to do, makes a lot of things easier, because then the things that are going to happen, it's just going to happen. And the last one I would say is that people tend to look at tools first before working on the culture. Culture and people are the ones who are going to make it happen. And then the tools are just going to come in, because these are the things that we need to do. Then the tools are going to come in. We've seen it wherein we bring in somebody from the outside, they come in and then they just disrupt everything because they have their own tools that they want to use. They don't want to use your tools. In my previous company, we've used this one. I know what works. We'll do this one, right? We've seen that too many times, and then it becomes disruptive and nothing happens for you. But where we've seen that success has been happening, it's just clarity of vision. When people are working on the same goals together, there's the morale that says you're doing something that is significant. Not only for the company, maybe in society, you're fulfilling a mission in your organization to make a difference. That's where you become successful. And everything else follows from that,
Hey, sorry, I don't know if you have the same problem as I do, but can I ask the rest of the panelists?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, now, yeah, we're back. Sorry, Eugene, we missed you for the last of the sentence, and we lost the voice. So let's end up, sorry, you're back, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's end up the discussion with Arlene here. We are a little bit over time, that's okay. I will not give the word to Dominic. He was talking earlier today in his keynote. So Arlene, let's end up today's discussion with your input about these red flags and on company maturity.
No pressure there. You know, what I was thinking about as we were talking about this is that word change management. I've done these different technology implementations of a massive scale that really change how people are working. And the technology isn't the problem. It's easy, to be perfectly honest. It's, can I get the organization, can I get the people to change? And that's the problem. And it goes into all those things that Eugene said. How do I manage them? Where is it coming from? Is it top down? Is it bottom up? And what's the communication plan? And on and on and on. And you have to have all of that in place. And I think back just not on where I am today, but at other places, I do think the best project in many ways that I did was top down. It might have been a little harsh for people who had to make the change. And I don't want to date myself about how old that was, but it was major change. But it was like, you are either going to do this or you will need to find another position. And I know that sounds harsh, but the vision was there that that's what we needed to do to get the ROI on the project and move it forward and make things better in several different areas. And then you need your champions. Like, you can have that top down, but you need your internal cheerleaders and champions of the project that can also take it from the bottom up. And I don't think you always know who those are going to be until you actually get into it. And then you have to groom them. But I think it's a lot more about management of people and processes. I think Eugene and Dave talked about that. You have to put all that in place, but I think when it comes together in both directions is when it's most successful.
Thank you very much, Arlene. And I'm really glad that we ended the discussion with people. That's great. Thank you very much for that. I apologize to all attendees of Kentico Experience Connection 2022 for being a little bit late and over time with panel discussion, but I believe you will forgive us because that was, in my eyes, a really excellent, great discussion. So I would like to thank my guests today for that. Dave Conder, Chief Technology Officer at Blumerus. Thank you, Dave. Eugene Padden, Chief Technology Officer at Ray Business Technologies. Thank you, Eugene. Wes McChristian, Global Kentico Experience Practice Director at AmericanEagle.com. Thank you, Wes. Arlene Goldberg, Director of E-Commerce at SHI. Thank you, Arlene. And Dominic Pinter, Managing Director here at Kentico Experience. I would like to also thank AmericanEagle.com, who was the gold partner of this panel discussion. Thank you very much for watching us. And with that, I would like to pass the word to Hanka Molíková to the studio to end the first day of Kentico Experience Connection 2022 for North America.